They are two main speakers, you know.
Okay, let's wait for them.
بس الصوت فيه ترجمة يكون وانت بتقول هاي بشوف نسيت وين ترجمة.
Okay, so Naji is actually joining at the moment. He should be on the call. Naji, can you maybe unmute and speak to us? We just want to test your video and your sound quality. You can unmute for us. It's unmute. I'm not sure if the interpreters can interpret.
Salma, let me take
الو مرحبا السلام عليكم
Naji Sana.
Okay.
مرحبا
Okay, great. وعليكم السلام.
واضح
Naji,
Can we see video quality? Yeah. We can
أيوة.
see his video. If you can switch it on, please.
مرحبا أستاذ ناجي، الصوت واضح.
مرحبا تمام.
Naji, بدنا نعمل تشيك على الفيديو، إذا ممكن تفتح الفيديو.
Does he need it
ممكن.
when he's speaking? Okay, all right. I can see his
واضح
video. Spotlighted.
واضح.
تمام.
شكرا.
Okay, great. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, Salma, I'm starting now.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Morning, everyone. Welcome to GCE's country level learning webinar. We will be officially disseminating the local education group handbook and we will just be discussing how coalitions should leverage opportunities in terms of the country level and looking at the key processes that are linked to the GPE 2025 by focusing on the Partnership Compact. Firstly, let me introduce myself. My name is Phumza Lutango. I'm the Advocacy Officer of GCE and also the CSO2 Focal Coordinator and Support for Abir and Solange, as well as I'll be your moderator for the day. The procession for today will begin with our regional president of GCE, Mr. Rifat, who will just give us an introduction and a brief on education financing, looking at the Middle East or the Arabic region. And then we will be talking about the GCE's Local Education Group Handbook. And then we will then hear from Abir Tamimi, her global perspectives and a brief experience that she has had, as well as shared practices that our coalition, Mr. Adam and Mr. Najee, will be giving us on their activities and how they have experienced the legs. And then the second agenda item, we'll be looking at the GCE's 2023 to 2026 strategic outline, which will be taken through by Stephanie Conrad. And then lastly, it will be Tess. Just to also give you a few house rules, please mute your microphones when we are speaking, as well as after each and every item, we'll open for discussion. And then we also just would like you to note that interpretation is available in Arabic. Thank you, and I now give forward to the GCE President, Mr. Rifat.
شكرا جزيلا، ويعني اهلا وسهلا في الجميع، وكل الشكر للحملة العالمية للتعليم وتحديدا للسكرتارية الحملة العالمية للتعليم، وكذلك للسكرتارية الحملة العربية للتعليم على تنظيمهم هذا اللقاء. وباعتقادي هذا اللقاء مهم جدا كونه راح يتناول اكثر من محور مهمة جدا للائتلافات التربوية، وخاصة الائتلافات اللي عضو في تمويل الشراكة العالمية للتعليم. هذا من جهة ثانية أيضا هو مهم جدا لخطة التعلم اللي آكيا يعني ثبتتها في أوغندا قبل شهر من الآن. فيما يتعلق في تمويل التعليم، أنا راح أشارك معكم باوربوينت اللي يعطيكم يعني صورة عامة عن هذا الموضوع، ولكن قبل بدء في الباوربوينت يعني بحب أقول إنه هناك نقاط أساسية فيما يتعلق في إشكالية التمويل وأزماتها وتحدياتها. النقطة الأولى تتعلق في إنه منطقتنا العربية تعج بالنزاعات، وبالتالي قضية التسلح يعني هي قضية مركزية وإشكالية، وهي جزء من التحديات اللي بنواجهها مش بس تمويل التعليم بل أيضا في تمويل القطاعات الأخرى. وأيضا هناك إشكالية في مفهوم المواطنة، وتحديدا فيما يتعلق بالضريبة والعدالة الضريبية في المنطقة العربية. وأيضا هناك قضية أخرى أيضا تشكل تحدي أمام تمويل التعليم والمتعلقة في الديون. فإحنا بنحكي عن إذا كنا عن التسلح بسبب النزاعات، إحنا بنحكي عن تقريبا إذا من 2009 ل 2018 العالم العربي يعني الإنفاق اللي أنفقوا على التسلح يقدر ب 1477 مليار دولار. يعني بتقدروا تتخيلوا هذا الرقم اللي على التسلح اللي باخذ من كل يعني حصة التعليم والصحة والحماية الاجتماعية. إذا بتحكي عن الديون بتحكي عن أقل دولة عليها ممكن 100 مليار دولار، وبالتالي ارتباطاتها هذا الدين، يعني ناهيك عن الفائدة اللي بيدفعوها هذه الدول، ناهيك عن نظام للأسف نظام الضريبي لا زال نظام غير عادل، وبالتالي ممكن يعني يلحق الضرر بالفئات الفقيرة، ولا يمكن حتى الدول من زيادة نسبة الموازنة الحكومية اللي أيضا هذا بيأثر على نسبة التمويل. فيما يتعلق بالسؤال الأهم هو كيف دائما نوفر تمويل كافي للتعليم. مصادر التعليم احنا اللي يعني بنعتمد عليها اما بتيجي من الحكومات المركزيه او من الحكومات اللامركزيه من خلال السلطات المحليه او من الموازنات الحكوميه او من الضرائب او من القروض والمنح والمساعدات الدوليه او من التمويل الاهلي. يعني هذه هي القضايا اللي اهم قضايا اللي احنا نعتمد عليها في التعليم. واقع التمويل في المنطقه العربيه، التمويل دائما يقاس بالنسبه للناتج المحلي. اذا في امكانيه بس اللي بيحكي يحط ميوت. متوسط اذا سمحت اللي بيحكي يحط ميوت لانه يعني مشكله. متوسط الانفاق عربيا ما يقدر 2.5% من الدخل القومي، متاسف مش الدخل القومي من الموازنات العامه تقريبا 13%. الانفاق على البحث العلمي انت متخيلين قديش؟ 1% عمليا من مجموع الدخل القومي، بينما اسرائيل تنفق 4.7%. يعني مجمل الانفاق اذا بدك تحسبه بالارقام تحكي عن 535 مليون دولار، بينما اسرائيل تنفق حوالي 9 مليار سنويا. والنتيجه يعني ممكن تحسبوها. جامعات تساهم في انتاج البحث العلمي ب1%. عدد الباحثين في العالم العربي 312 من كل مليون، بينما في باقي العالم 5000 من كل مليون. يعني هذه المقاربات مهمه بس تيجي نحكي عن تمويل التعليم. الابحاث 3 في العشرة في الألف من مجموع الابحاث المنشوره عالميا. 31% من الادمغه المهاجره هم من الدول العربيه. 54% من العقول اللي بتهاجر تيجي من الدول العربيه. يعني روح شوفوا، يعني هذيك المره انا تفاجات عندما ماكرون راح زار مركز ابحاث للبحث عن لقاح الفيروس. 10 من 11 واحد جايين من المنطقه العربيه. فهذا ايضا له تاثير. هذه اثار عدم تمويل التعليم. لهذه الاسباب هذا كلها من غياب الاستقرار السياسي والعداله الاجتماعيه، نقص الحريات المدنيه والسياسيه، عدم توفر فرص البحث العلمي وفي سياق مسارات التمويل واستخدامه. معظم التمويل يعني يذهب الى البنيه التحتيه والمصاريف الاداريه. بشكل عام هناك في تراجع حدي في تمويل التعليم، وكانه يعني لم تعد التعليم هي من اولويات الحكومات الا في سياق تسيير الامور. في هناك اسباب حقيقه لزياده الانفاق على التعليم تتعلق في ارتفاع تكلفه التعليم نتيجه ارتفاع الاسعار، التغيرات الاقتصاديه العالميه والمحليه مثل ارتفاع الاسعار والتضخم المالي وانخفاض قيمه بعض العملات، تزايد المصاريف الجاري من اداره ورواتب ومواد تعليم وكتب صيانه الكهرباء. هذا بيحسبوش. يعني امرار بحطوا لك الميزانيه قبل 3 سنين او 5 سنين على وزاره التعليم، بيحسبوا مثلا اللوح $10 وبيحسبوش. يطلعوا اليوم مثلا اليوم في زياده في سعر البترول، في زياده في سعر المواد الاساسيه. هذا كله ما بنحسب، وبالتالي بصير نوع من تنقيص الصرف على كثير من القضايا. مثلا اذا بدهم يعملوا مختبر علوم بصفوا يبقوا حاطين له مبلغ يعملوا مختبر كامل، نتيجه ارتفاع الاسعار بصفوا مش قادرين يعملوا نص الاشياء للمختبر العلومي، بصير ما لهش فائده في هذا الموضوع. هاي جزء من الاشكاليات. ايضا زياده المصاريف الراسماليه من اراضي ومباني وتنشيد واسعه وجديده. هذا ايضا يعني مثلا على سبيل فلسطين محتاجين 100 مدرسه هلا سنويا مشان يقدروا يلبوا الاكسس. فبالتالي هذا له لازم يكون في حسابات الدول. ليش احنا محتاجين ننفق على التعليم؟ ما بكفي يقول والله كل الطلاب بروحوا على المدارس. على اي مدارس بروحوا؟ الان في بلاد اللي كانت يعني عندها اتساع، اليوم في عندهم 4 وجبات في التدريس. يعني في اليوم بروحوا يعني 4 افواج من الطلاب بيدرسوا ب4 اوقات مختلفه. انتشار مبادئ الديمقراطيه والعداله الاجتماعيه وتكافل الفرص مهم جدا في هذا الاطار. التضخم وارتفاع الاسعار وانخفاض القوه الشرائيه لمعظم العملات العربيه. يعني شوفوا شو بصير في لبنان للليره اللبنانيه وكذلك حتى العملات. يعني انت بس تيجي تحكي عن عملات عربيه تصير تحسبها بالملايين، يعني بالتالي بصير العمله ما لهاش قيمه. فاذا انت حطيت الموازنه في هذه العملات اللي بتتارجح ايضا فيها اشكاليه. وايضا في هناك ارتفاع كلفه المشروعات التربويه، وفي افتقار سياسه الترشيد للانفاق وغياب التخطيط بعيد المدى. يعني بروحوا احيانا لسياسات التقشف بدون اخذ بعين الاعتبار تاثيرها على التعليم وعلى الصحه وعلى الحمايه الاجتماعيه. وهناك ايضا انت هلا مع الجائحه في تطور هائل في التكنولوجيا. طب هذا كيف بدك تدبره؟ فبالتالي بده انفاق تعليم، ما بكفي يقول انه انا عندي ولا 15% من الموازنه الحكوميه على التعليم. هل 15% هذه فعلا بتقضي كل هذه التطورات؟ ام يعني اذا تركت الامور هذه بعد فتره بصف التعليم يعني لا يساهم في التنميه. وبالتالي اذا التعليم لن يساهم في التنميه، ومثل ما هلا بيحكوا على ترانسفورماتيف اديوكيشن، يعني التعليم يجب ان يكون تحويلي، بمعنى ان يغير في حياه الناس. واذا اردنا انه التعليم يغير في حياه الناس فانت محتاج يعني تحط كل قوتك الماديه في كل جوانب المدرسه كوحده تعليم. ف يعني تشخيصنا كحمله عربيه للتعليم، انا ما بعرفش اذا ضل معي وقت، ولكن تشخيصنا بشكل سريع يعني لا تزال نسبه التمويل في الميزانات الحكوميه دون المطلوب عمليا. البلدان المانحه لا تعطي قطاع التعليم اولويه عند تخطيط وتنفيذ المساعدات الانسانيه. يعني في اليمن بس يعطوا تمويل في اليمن كله بروح للمساعدات الانسانيه، والتعليم بيكونش جزء مهم جدا في هذه خطط التمويل. وهذه جزء من الاشكاليات في مناطق النزاعات عندما يقرر التمويل على المستوى الدولي. لهذا سبب المجتمع المدني بس يعمل ادفوكسي بده يطلع لهذا، يعني بيقدر ياثر. في اليمن الائتلاف التربوي المفروض قادر ياثر في نوعيه وطبيعه هذه المساعدات عبر ادفوكسي متعدده ومتنوعه بالشراكه مع الحمله العالميه للتعليم والعربيه كذلك. فلا زالت ميزانيات التعليم غير يعني البيانات عن الموازنات عندنا مش دقيقه، ما في عندنا معلومات، وبالتالي هذا ايضا بشكل اشكال. القطاع الخاص للاسف اخفق في مسؤولياته الاجتماعيه تجاه التعليم، وحتى في قطاع خاص بيحاول يروح بالتالي بده يتدخل في التعليم وكانه هو المسؤول عن التعليم، وبنروح لخصخصه. بتصفي المدارس قاعده تطلب رسوم بالاف الدولارات اللي الفقراء لا يستطيعوا سدادها، وبالتالي بيخلق حاله تفاوت اجتماعي في هذه البلد. واحيانا حتى بس يروحوا يدفعوا شيء للمجتمع من المسؤوليه الاجتماعيه بيخصموها من الضريبه تبعتهم، قد ما يحطوا شيء زياده لا، حتى اللي بيعطوه امرار تبرعات بيخصموه من الضريبه اللي لازم يدفعوها للدوله، وهذا جزء من الاشكاليه. الكثير من المؤسسات التعليميه في فلسطين واليمن وسوريا يعني تم استهدافها، وبالتالي يعني دمرت كامله. هذا ايضا جزء حمل على الانفاق على التعليم. في على سبيل المثال في بعض البلدان اللي عندها ضريبه المعارف، متاسف انا في بعض الكلمات ما كانتش كامله في العرض، ضريبه المعارف اللي هي تجمع من المدن والقرى، وبالتالي هي لازم تروح للتعليم، الا انه بعض البلديات تستخدمها لصالحها لاهدافها اللي مش لازم، لانه هذه حق، هذه ضريبه التربيه والتعليم، هذا المفروض تروح للمدارس. المعلمين عندنا بواجهوا يعني تحديات هائله، وانتم ادرى مني في التحديات اللي بواجهوها المعلمين في اليمن اللي لا يتقاضوا رواتب منذ سنين، وبعدين بيجوا المجتمع الدولي بيطالبوا اليمن انه كان يصل 2030. كيف بده يصل 2030 والمدرسين بياخذوش رواتب؟ وحتى معاشات الرواتب في كل العالم العربي يعني لا ترقى للمستوى المطلوب. يعني انت احيانا بقول لك يا عمي بدنا ندفع للمهندسين اللي بيهندسوا الطرق والبنايات والعمران، طب يعطي اللي بيهندس العقول، يعني اللي بيهندسوا العقول اللي هم المعلمين معاشاتهم يعني لا ترقى لحد الحفاظ على الكرامه. هذا جزء من المشكله اللي عندنا بس نيجي نحكي عن تمويل التعليم. وبالتالي مهما حكينا عن الانفاق في التعليم مطولين تنقول احنا وصلنا، ما بصير نقول والله احنا عندنا 4%. 4% وين بتروح هذه؟ كيف ممكن تقضي كل هذه الاحتياجات؟ ف الحمله بتطالب بانه المسؤوليه الاجتماعيه في القطاع الخاص لازم تتجنب قضيه خصمها من الضريبه. ضريبة المعارف الموجودة في بعض الدول اللي هي ضريبة التربية والتعليم يجب أن تكون مخصصة للتعليم، ويجب أن يكون هناك الربط بين جمع الضرائب والإنفاق على التعليم، ويكون الضرائب فيها عدالة ضريبية. يعني ما بيظبطش أنت الفقراء يدفعوا ضريبة مثل واحد بياخذ بالملايين، واحد بياخذ $1000 وواحد بياخذ مليون، صفي دافعين نفس الضريبة. وايضا احنا مسؤوليتنا انه الناس ما تتهربش من الضريبه، لانه هذه سرقه، وبالتالي يعني احنا مع دفع الضريبه، لانه بالضروره نراقب الحكومه هاي الضريبه اللي بندفع لكم اياها كيف بترجع لنا. والحملة العالمية للتعليم مطالب بتنظيم حملات، تخصيص برامج في موضوع التمويل المحلي للتعليم، لأنه أيضا إحنا بدنا نساهم مع الحكومات في قضية التمويل التعليم المحلي، ولكن هذا يحتاج إلى سياسات محاربة الفساد، سياسات العدالة الضريبية، النزاهة، الشفافية، ساعتها الناس تقدر تكون جزء من دعم التعليم. وبالضرورة التركيز على المناطق المهمشة والمناطق اللي فيها نزاعات وحروب، واحنا بنطالب بانشاء صندوق للامم المتحده خاص في المناطق المتضرره. يعني في مناطق النزاعات الاكثر تضررا لازم يكون في صندوق خاص، واحنا بنحيي التعليم لا ينتظر في هذا الجانب، لانه هو صندوق متخصص ايضا للاجئين والمناطق الاكثر تضررا. و يعني الحمله قدامها كثير، وخاصه فيما يتعلق في الديون. يجب اسقاط الديون، يجب بناء تفاهمات جديدة مع المؤسسات اللي بتمول، بحيث أن لا يتم استغلال الدول وبالتالي استعبادها، لأنه الدول اللي بتأخذ قروض وقرا قروض في نهاية المطاف بتصفي مستعمرة من البنك هذا أو من القطاع المالي هذا. ويعني هذا بشكل عام، وأنا متأسف إذا زدت شوية في الوقت. شكرا لكم.
شكرا دكتور رفعت.
Thank you, Dr. Rifat. Thank you for taking us through that. Very informative. Just let me share my screen so that I take you through the learning handbook that is focused on country level activities that are linked to GPE. The learning handbooks gives us a tool that we can use as coalitions on how to leverage opportunities linked to GPE 2025, focusing on the Partnership Compact. It shows us how to coordinate, engage, and the key players that we need to mobilize and influence in order for us to ensure that we have a shared agenda in the GPE. CISO's representatives' main role within the Partnership Compact at the country level is to bring about the local realities and ensure that these local realities with the constituencies that they represent are captured when we are then making the systems transformation grants inputs into the global level. This picture shows us of an outline of the key players that are happening at the country level as well as the global level. The country level, which is centralized around the local education group space, in which consists of government, coalitions, private sector, bilaterals, and teachers. And then this is when we outline and we highlight the enabling factors and the item systems in which we provide a context analysis of the key interventions and bottlenecks that we face in ensuring transformative education. These inputs then relate to the global space. In this context, it goes to CSO2, your board reps, Solange and Abir. And then once the global space has decided, the fundings is then released back to the country level. So the key role of, the key role of civil society in GPE is firstly, to enhance transparency and accountability of the grant agent, as well as government through the Ministry of Education, of ensuring that education is meant and it goes beyond the policy dialogue and the policy directions of the partnership context, but ensuring that SDG 4 goals are achieved. Our role also is to engage constituencies on integral GPE activities, processes, and grant decisions, and putting pressure on governments and international donors by ensuring that education financing interventions cover issues of gender inclusion and equality. We also have a critical role to play as being critical accountability guard at the country and global level to ensure that the systems transformation grants decision-making covers the aspects that are faced on ground level, that is faced in the education sectors. Now, in order to influence these key decision makers that I've outlined in the previous slide, we need to be able to build powerful networks. We need to be able to engage with all stakeholders despite hierarchies and lead to influence decision-making processes. What kind of effective relationships beyond us just being civil society's organization, as well as building networks with people who are like-minded, as well as partners who share the same values as us. We do this by lobbying and setting relationships, as well as also advocating for key things such as gender inclusion and how the level of our engagement between DCPs, teachers' unions, women's rights movement to ensure that the decisions that are made at the country level through the Partnership Compact are captured. Now, the key things that I will be discussing that coalitions need to leverage on GPE opportunities are linked to the GPE 2025 on three main aspects: the Partnership Compact, the Systems Transformation Grant, and the monitoring and evaluations of the systems transformation. Firstly, the Partnership Compact focuses on specific country system transformation priorities. The compact is driven by the government-led policy dialogue on actions that all partners will take and identify the resources and capacities that are needed to ensure a transformative education system. The compact brings together the Ministry of Education and education partners to support transformative policies to accelerate access to education and learning, while identifying key interventions and policy recommendations required to unlock the issues that are faced at country level. Now, the Systems Transformation Grant, which is the main grant that is released at country level, has two main purposes. Firstly, to catalyze progress in the GPE 2025 operating model by identifying the key interventions under the enabling factors that I will explain at a later stage, and how to support countries to deliver a system that consists of evidence-based investments in programs to unlock systems bottlenecks. Thirdly, providing a monitoring evaluation of the country's analysis, a rigorous independent analysis of the effective education systems through the ITAP. Now, the key focus areas that the coalitions need to focus in when discussing the Partnership Compact can be focused in four areas. In strengthening the country-level partnership and dialogue, the partnership needs to be able to identify prioritized policy areas which have the systematic impact and the change that is required. The compact should also then identify opportunities to accelerate progress towards gender equalities and prioritize reform. Secondly, strengthening the education sector through the enabling factors by analyzing the enabling factors and identifying the key gaps and conditions that are required in order to catalyze through the systems transformation. Thirdly, streamlining the systems transformation grant as to what are the key things in the enabling factors that will be required in order to ensure an effective systems transformation is implemented, and strengthening transparency and accountability of the grant agent. Ensuring that the grant agent, once the systems transformation grant is released, there is effective implementation of all the key enabling factors that were outlined in the ITAP. Now, the local education group is a space for collaborative forum and policy dialogue in which it gives space for primary consultation. Now, this is a space for country level engagement, and for an increased engagement in the legs, we require two critical issues to be considered in assessing the effectiveness of influence that coalitions can have in education policy process. Firstly, the extent to which they are broad-based and able to represent different groups of society. How and to what level are we promoting issues of gender and social inclusion on all marginalized groups? And secondly, to what extent to which they engage in the education policy process by providing evidence-based information that is citizen-led. We then do this by looking at an analysis of the particular country that we'll be discussing, as well as the enabling factors being gender issues, multi-stakeholder coordinations that require, what are the challenges, how well are the teachers trained, and then conducting a rigorous assessment of these factors, and then giving these factors and using these issues in order to influence the policy dialogue that is happening at country level. All of these assessments then go to the decisions and to the inputs that is then done by the board at the global level. Now, the role of civil society's organization in the legs is to hold the partnership accountable by conducting an independent assessment and monitoring for an effective implementation of the transformative education systems. We do this by not only focusing on the policy targets of the compact, but actually looking at, are our education systems reaching the SDG 4 goals and targets? We conduct context-sensitive inputs by engaging with relative community-based organization, women and feminist movements, disability organization, to ensure we have a contextualized local reality of that particular country. Now, GCE measures civil society participation in the legs in terms of four ways. Firstly, weak engagement is when civil society's engagement in the leg, when there's only one person who represents us and they have no links on other constituencies and there's no consultations or engagement with basically key players who would be impacted by the decisions made in the compact. Minimum engagement is when there are more than one person from civil societies representing those diverse views is present. And then good engagement in the leg is when there's genuinely a representative voice through a coalition with multiple people invited, and it proves clear links to the broader constituencies. Now we need to be here at excellent engagement in where we have active representation of both broad national coalitions, engaging with teachers' unions, and with clear links to their respective constituencies. Further, what is key to our role engaging in the legs is that once inputs are done within the legs, we go back to our constituencies, providing feedbacks on how the processes were undertaken. Now we have key lessons that we can share in terms of other regions on how they were able to successfully influence decision-making within the legs. In the context of Bangladesh, they were advocating for issues of inclusion and equality in education through the leg, and also working with communities, helping them to empower and understand their rights and channel their concerns up to the education ministry. Secondly, in the context of Nepal, the coalition was able to build civil society's organization capacities to engage the government meaningfully, also in issues of equality and education. But in the context of Vietnam, they have raised issues around discriminatory practices within the leg, as well as raising and advocating for the recruitment of deaf teachers and advocating for sign languages and the lack of funding. So these are the things that coalitions have developed their credibility and legitimacy and influenced key decision-making processes by raising matters mainly linked to marginalized groups. Now, the key challenges in the legs can be outlined briefly. Internal factors being the limited time to engage in the entire partnership compact, given that maybe reports are given during a very constrained time, and then we don't have the necessary time to consult with other constituencies or to bring it back to community-based organization to get their inputs. The external factors that have limited coalitions from participating in legs have been government's willingness to hear the inputs of the coalitions. In some spaces, local education groups don't even exist. And while in context of political crisis or procreated states or authoritarian states where coalitions or civil society are just not welcome. Now, GCE's key best practices in the legs can be seen as, firstly, we need including the voices and perspectives of those that are not usually heard in policy-making dialogue or spaces. Secondly, we need to establish well-defined mechanisms of how we coordinate our inputs from civil society constituencies and the feedback back between the communities, what happens in the legs at country level, to the representatives in global, and how all of those consultations happen. We engage with good evidence-based and qualitative evidence in order to build our credibility in the leg, while also providing policy recommendations and solutions. We raise the voices of the poorest as well as the most marginalized, and who are connected to the communities in which they live in, who will be able to give us those context-sensitive and local realities that we require. We also need to have a set of policy focus that informs our mandates and our voting decision support when engaging with decisions of systems transformations, as well as critical guarding against international influence on policy processes. Now, an impactful partnership at the country level should build on existing policy frameworks and sector plans and dialogues. The partnership compact should not be a substitute for an education sector plan, but rather a commitment to education financing by providing the particular grants. So we need to guard the space of international financing spaces, such as the GPE, pushing their own policy frameworks as opposed to be focusing on education financing. Systems transformation requires a paradigm shift that moves in its approach and focuses on a prioritized focus that will adequately focus on unblocking systematic challenges that will be able to reach the SDG 4 goals. Now, in the context of talking about an independent, rigorous assessment of the enabling factors, these are the key things that we look at. Firstly, data and evidence. As coalitions, we need to be able to play a part in generating our own independent knowledge and evidence that will be able to inform the policy direction that will happen in the legs. We need to have the capacity and bring about our own qualitative and quantitative research and statistical evidence gaps once we have engaged with people who are in communities of the realities that are happening. Secondly, a gender responsive sector plan. How far is the education sector plan of that particular country will mainstream gender and address issues of inclusion and gender that are being faced? And we also need to examine the level of gender responsiveness that is required of that particular country between low, medium, and high priority. The key role of CSOs in that is to ensure gender equality is addressed at the country level by influencing the political challenges that systematically stop people, gender or girls, from engaging in education. A multi-stakeholder policy dialogue. What are the links that we can establish on the actual country level that will be able to push our own influence in our own ways that we want to participate within the legs? As well as when you look at volume, equality, and efficiency, what is the kind of capacity and resources that is required to unlock those challenges that we have identified? Now, with this enabling factors that I've just outlined. Let me make an example of the Syrian Arabic region. The context-sensitive analysis is that Syria has been in one of the longest conflicts probably in the world. And secondly, these issues in terms of gender and girls are being forced in child marriages. There are issues of sanitation and facilities in the schools. 1 in 3 schools have been war zones or places of conflict where children have not been able to go to school due to that, as well as a decay in infrastructure, as well as teachers not being highly trained in order to give Syrian children. That's our context analysis. We then provide independent data and evidence that will show the context analysis of Syria. Gender responsiveness. We highlight that we have a high priority in Syria that will bring girls back to school, especially those who are forced under child marriages or all those issues. And we also give proposals of whether GPE could unlock maybe the multiplier grant. And then an M&E results framework, which is focused on once the system transformation grant is released, what are the key interventions that have been identified and how effective has that grant been in addressing the issues happening in Syria? Then education or debt sustainability in the context of education. Now, this is the context of the World Bank of a country that I will not name, where there was a $50 million credit and a $50 million grant. So these are the things as civil society organization that we need to guide in terms of the multiplier co-financing. How is the actual co-financing actually laid out? Is it 100% a grant or is it part of it an actual credit? This is why we need to advocate for issues of debt sustainability by ensuring that even if they do release grants, how sustainable for that particular country will that grant be? What are the kind of the conditions that are linked to that loan? Are these loans linked to conditions of further than policy conditions or asset control within that country? Even if banks do not have the mandate in the educational matters, it is conditions that severely impact the states to comply in terms of this regard. The World Bank or GPE needs to focus on education financing, and there is a sustained control of trying to control the policy dialogue or the directions that countries moved in sectors such as education as well as health. And I'd like to leave you this as our role as civil societies being critical accountability guard. It is necessary to insist that international aid and corporations are not called upon to define the context of public policies in developing countries. The donor-orientated and aid-orientated actions could be example of colonization when their programs not only impose payment conditions, but also the way in which these resources should be invested. GCE, as well as coalitions, therefore, need to guard on the way these education financing are developing between credits as well as grants. For me, that is all, and thank you. So before I take a question and answer session, I'd like my colleague Abir to firstly give us the global perspective and her experience as a board rep. Thank you, Abir.
شكرا فوزة، مساء الخير للجميع. بس رح احكي بالعربي ورح احكي بهيك خلاصة اللي تفضلت فيه فوزة حاليا، على انه تهدف هذه الورشة الى تزويد الائتلافات التربوية الوطنية بمنصة يمكنها من خلالها الاستمرار في تبادل افضل الممارسات والمعلومات فيما يخص الاساليب والاستراتيجيات الناجعة للانخراط في مجموعات التعليم المحلية. يعتبر دليل التعلم الذي أعدته الحملة العالمية للتعليم بمثابة دليل إرشادي لمشاركة المجتمع المدني في التخطيط الوطني لقطاع التعليم في البلدان الخاضعة لمنحة الشراكة العالمية للتعليم. أبرز ما أود التنويه إليه هو التوجه الفعلي والحقيقي من الشراكة العالمية للتعليم للشراكة مع مؤسسات المجتمع المدني في كافة مراحل التخطيط والتصميم للمنح، وحتى مرحلة رفعها إلى مجلس إدارة الشراكة العالمية للمصادقة عليها. أهم ما يميز نظام التشغيل الجديد وفق استراتيجية الشراكة العالمية للتعليم هو وجود ميثاق الشراكة، والذي من خلاله سيتم تحديد أولويات العمل والموارد ومخصصات المنح بشكل تشاركي ووطني. هذا ما أهم ما وددت التركيز عليه قبل الانتقال إلى العرض المرئي من طرف. Okay, I always have this problem. بشكل سريع حأحكي على ما هي مجموعات التعليم المحلية. مجموعات التعليم المحلية هي مجموعات وطنية مسؤولة عن دعم عملية تحليل قطاع التعليم والتطوير والتنفيذ والرسم من خلال سياسات شاملة بقيادة الحكومة وبعضوية مشتركة من المجتمع المدني ووكلاء المنح وشركاء التنمية وشركاء القطاع الخاص والوكالات التنسيقية. مثل ما تفضلت هي كنزة، يعتمد نجاح نظام التشغيل الجديد للمنح على قوة مجموعات التعليم المحلية، وبالتالي يستطيع المجتمع المدني المشاركة في عدة تدخلات من خلال مجموعات التعليم المحلية، من خلال تقييم العوامل التمكينية لتحقيق التغيير في أنظمة وسياسات التعليم، وتقييم التشاركية في العمل من خلال الرقابة على إشراك جميع الأطراف ذات العلاقة. التدخل الثاني الذي يمكنه مؤسسات المجتمع المدني التدخل بها من خلال المشاركة في عملية إعداد ميثاق الشراكة. إذن حالياً إحنا نتحدث عن الفرص المتاحة للمجتمع المدني من خلال الانخراط في مجموعات التعليم المحلية. برأينا يمكن لصوت المجتمع المدني القوي في عملية التحليل وتحديد الأولويات والتشخيص أن يساعد الدول بشكل حقيقي في تغيير الأنظمة التعليمية. وحالياً يدعم صندوق التعليم بصوت عالي EOL قدرة المجتمع المدني لتحقيق أقصى استفادة من هذه الفرصة من خلال تعزيز مشاركة المجتمع المدني في تخطيط التعليم المستجيب للنوع الاجتماعي والحوار حول السياسات. حالياً لدينا كمؤسسات مجتمع مدني فرصة مهمة للتواجد في مساحات صنع القرار، ولكن الدور الأكبر علينا من خلال أخذ زمام المبادرة والانخراط بشكل ممنهج واستراتيجي وعلى كافة الأصعدة، ولعب دور أساسي في نقل الحقائق المحلية إلى المستوى العالمي. ومن واجبنا أيضاً ضمان سماع صوتنا في القضايا الهامة التي تتم مناقشتها ضمن مجموعات التعليم المحلية. بالتالي وبشكل عام التنسيق والمشاركة والحشد ما بين أصحاب المصلحة على المستوى الوطني مهم جداً لتقديم خطة مشتركة للشراكة العالمية للتعليم، والذي من شأنه التأثير أيضاً على أعضاء مجلس إدارة الشراكة العالمية من خلال استقطاب حلفاء من شركاء الدول النامية ووكلاء المنح ونقابات المعلمين. في الحقيقة أبرز التحديات التي نواجهها أنا وزميلتي سولونج بصفتنا ممثلات لمؤسسات المجتمع المدني لدول الجنوب في مجلس إدارة الشراكة العالمية للتعليم هو ضعف التشبيك والتنسيق مع شركاء الدول النامية أي الحكومات. وبالتالي على المجتمع المدني ممثل بالائتلافات التربوية الفرصة للعمل على دعمنا ودعم مواقفهم من خلال عدة توصيات سأقوم بطرحها حاليا. أول شيء ضمان تكاتف الجهود على مستوى وطني بإيجاد حلفاء مناصرين للائتلافات التربوية والمؤسسات القاعدية الأعضاء التي تعمل لصالح الأشخاص الأكثر عرضة للإقصاء والتهميش، والذي من شأنه زيادة التأثير على السياسات من خلال تطوير روابط فعالة وعلاقات قائمة على الثقة مع صانعي السياسات وشركاء البلدان النامية وأصحاب المصلحة. أيضا نوصي بضرورة العمل على تقديم الأدلة والبحوث النوعية من قبل الائتلافات التربوية من أجل ردم فجوة قلة البيانات المتوفرة حول التعليم، بالإضافة إلى تكوين المعرفة والأدلة لإثراء حوار السياسات على مستوى وطني ودولي. أيضا نوصي بأهمية الانخراط في المشاورات الإقليمية التي تعقدها مجموعة مؤسسات المجتمع المدني لدول الجنوب CSO2 بالتعاون مع الحملة العالمية للتعليم للمشاركة في بلورة موقف مشترك يمكنني أنا وزميلتي من تقديمه لمجلس إدارة الشراكة العالمية من خلال التصويت للمنح، بالإضافة إلى التأثير في سياسات الحوكمة لدى الشراكة. بالنهاية أيضا نوصي ممثلين الائتلافات التربوية الموجودين معنا لليوم بضرورة التشاور معنا أي ممثلي تحالف مؤسسات المجتمع المدني لدول الجنوب في القضايا الحاسمة وللوصول إلى موقف مشترك قبل الانخراط في اجتماعات مجموعات التعليم المحلية. بهذا يمكن للمنظمات المشاركة بنشاط على المستوى الوطني من خلال مجموعات التعليم المحلية. أيضا نحن نحرص على أن يكون المجتمع المدني يكون له مشاركة نشطة ويحظى بمصداقية ومهنية في مجموعات التعليم المحلية، وأن يظهر قيمته للحكومات والجهات المانحة، وبالتالي يكون التأثير أكبر في منابر صنع القرار كمنبر مجلس إدارة الشراكة العالمية للتعليم. نتطلع اليوم صراحة لسماع من تجارب دول مثل الصومال والسودان لحتى يخبرونا عن تجاربهم في مجموعات التعليم المحلية وأفضل الممارسات والممارسات الفضلى في كيفية التأثير على سياسات التعليم في دولهم. شكرا. Over to you, Hamza.
Thank you so much, Abu. Sorry I had a technical issue there. Thank you so much, Abu, for that reiteration and information. I've got two country level, Somalia and Sudan. I guess Mr. Adam can start from Somalia. He'll be giving us a brief on shared experiences that are happening in the league and what are the key lessons and challenges that he has faced by participating in the league. Mr. Adam?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. I hereby appreciate all of the organizers of this meeting giving me Somalia. I also give a thanks to Kia for the
Mr. Adam, sorry, the sound is not clear.
Hamza, can you ask
كيف شهاداتكم؟ لا الحمد لله كله تمام. الله يوفقكم.
Colleagues, can you please mute your mics? Thank you. Mr. Adam, can you please speak using the computer's microphone, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're clear.
Thank you very much. I'm going to present Somalia local education structure. Will you be able to share my presentation?
Okay, share screen. Yes, can you see it?
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, in Somalia, we have local education group, and they have their own structure. And I'm going to present how is the leg structure in Somalia. It's like two. Yeah, education sector coordination. There are two education structures, which is one is the education sector coordination, which is leading by the Ministry of Education, and always they organize this meeting, they share agenda, they send invitations. They have the whole responsibility for this, and we also have another education cluster, which is leading UNICEF. It's also thank you. There is also another cluster which is called education cluster. It is regional level and it is national level. This cluster, and always this cluster is leading by UNICEF. Okay, next slide. Next slide. No, previous slide. There are local actors who always attend these meetings. Both of them, they are state level actors and non-state actors. The state actors are the federal ministry, the federal minister, the line education minister of each federal state, and the local government of district level. These are both state level. They always come and attend, so we take community decisions. There are also non-state actors, which are United Nations agencies. They attend the meetings like UNICEF, UNCR. They are also African Union. They have also education unit. They come and attend these meetings. Also IGAD, which is regional management of AU, Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia. They also attend. Also, international NGOs like GBE, representative of Somali, Save the Children, ADRA, CARE, all these international NGOs always attend this meeting. There are also local actors like national NGOs, like civil society groups, including our coalition, and teacher unions, parents, they all attend. Also, there is private sector who are interested in education, like the big companies or private education networks. We have almost 14 private education networks and privatization education schools in Somalia. And also big companies, they support education, like the telecommunication, bigger telecommunication companies, they open education centers. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. The deliveries of the local education groups, mostly local education groups discussion is related on the national education policy dialogue. Sometimes we discuss on the policies, policy formation, policy revision. That's one item. Also, there's another item which is funding review and endorsement. Is we need to review GPE funding. We need to review what's called international NGO that support or EU that support education in Somalia. We review their funding and we give them endorsement within the local education groups. There's also another responsibility task which is called joint review of education sector. We come together and review annually. It's annual basis. We review. There's also when we need to develop 5-year strategic plan for the education sector, we develop national education sector strategic plan, and also in the local education group meetings, the education partners, they present their projects, the update of projects, because we want to avoid overlapping. The last assignment of the local education group is called education sector analysis. We always do every 2 to 3 years national level education sector analysis, and we produce the report. Last report, the education sector analysis we produced is last year, June last year, and it was telling us that the number of school-aged children are 4.6 million children, and 3 million out of this 4.5 million, 4.6 million, these children are out of school. So it's almost more than 60% of children are out of school. So like this, the local education they do analysis. One of the key thematic areas that the local education groups they do is called education emergencies. We come together, we develop what's called 4W matrices. We know who is doing what and where. So which NGO is doing what activities and where they are doing. Also, we develop this called GPS. Exactly the location of the project, the education project. We also have another thematic group which is called inclusive education for children with disabilities. We need our education to be inclusive. The education the children with disabilities, like those blind children, or deaf children, or those who are migrated or disability, they do get education, and mostly almost 2% of these children only get education, and the 98% do not get education. We also discuss technical education and also skill development, because Somalia mostly historically we had conflict years, we historically had a drought and affected population. Then people do not attend education. Then if the child not attend education and grown up, when he's 60 or she's 60 years old, then they need some kind of skills. So thanks to the government of Germany, they support us in technical, and the EU, European Union, they support us in this section. We also activate group gender equality in education. We develop a framework that we can support girls' education improvements. Also, there is a thematic group with advocacy and communication awareness, where our coalition is a member, active member. We also have what's called accelerated basic education thematic working group. Since our country, the children, families do not send education to their children, they do not send their children to education centers until the age of 10 or 12. Then we need to do what's called accelerated basic education. The child should get primary education fully. Then we develop what's called ABE program, and that's supported by USAID and United States, which almost $50 million. And now almost 6,000 children have been enrolled in this program. Mostly their age is between 10 to 60 years old. You can understand these children, if they are not given the chance of education, they will not get educated. And then also we have thematic groups for non-formal education. So all these thematic groups are under the local education groups. Next slide. Next slide. How when we the coalition secretaries, when they attend these important meetings, how it's possible to report back to the coalition members. And when we when the local education groups takes a decision or shares as information, then we also share with the information to our college members who directly contacted. We do also the social media. Even, for example, 1 hour ago, our program education program manager, or Mrs. Anna, and me as a coordinator of coalition, we have been attending big national education planning event, which was taking place and was running by the Minister of Education, Care International. They were discussed about the improvement of the GCE program in Somalia last 2 years. So, like this big event, immediately when we were inside the meeting, we shared this information through the Twitter, through the Facebook, through social media, so that our college members, even when I check my WhatsApp, some of the college members says, "Where is this meeting taking place?" They are taking place in the ministry, inside the ministry. Can we come to that meeting? One of the college members told me, asked me. Then I said, "Yes, you can come." So this immediately we post, and the information of the is shared through the social media immediately, and we do direct contact. The second methodology, this is the ad hoc meetings. Sometimes we call a meeting for all the college members to come, which not pre-planning, but it was urgent meeting. Then we discuss issues raised. Like example, last month we produced a research based on the children, disadvantaged children. That research, we called all our college members to give us, to validate the research. They read carefully, they requested some areas to be corrected, and that research we have.
آدم.
Yeah.
سوري بس تقدر تقرب شوي لأنه الصوت كثير بعيد، الترجمة توقف.
اوكي سأسرع إن شاء الله.
بس لا مش تسرع، تقدم لأنه الصوت بعيد.
Okay.
We can't hear you well, please.
We also have what's called the coalition of also like this validation workshop. We requested ad hoc meeting for all members, then they corrected our research. The research was related on the children in the displaced campus, and we asked 119 households and asked them if they send their children to school. 73.1% of this household heads or responsible people, like the mother, they told us they do not send their children to school because of financial support, lack of financial support, because the Ministry of the Education parties have not contacted them, because of the school is far from their area, because of several reasons. So, like that case, we call all the coalition members to come together for ad hoc meeting to do validation, to take information each other. We have a scheduled quarterly meeting for the board of the coalition and the secretary. And lastly, we have what's called General Assembly meeting for annually, which is all the members. If we want to elect a new board, if we want to develop a new strategy for the next 3 years, if we want to review our current strategic plan, we all do in the General Assembly. And our membership, coalition membership, is open to all those who are interested in education, those who want to deliver education services, those who want to advocate for education, the right to education. We welcome. And these members include women organizations like the Southern Gary Timur Award, Maani Vocational Training Center. All these women development organizations, they support us in the side of gender equality in education and the girls' education program. We also have members from the youth, like YACO, Youth Empowering Council. Also, we have Green Light, which is an environmental youth that was protecting the environment and the education spaces. We also have Somali youth education programs. Also, we have a member of the disability organization like the Disability Aid Foundation, Somali Institute of Special Education Needs, Somali Organization for National of the Deaf Children, and Dawa organization that's supporting education in Somalia for the last 22 years, for the last 32 years. Also, our members include teacher unions, Somali National Teacher Union, Somali Teacher Syndicate. Also, we have school union like the Benin School Union. There are other members who are more interested in education, like those who are working in technology, which is called MTII, or academic scholars or researchers, or local foundation like the IFTI Foundation, who last month they support us in the development of that research, and also SAFO Foundation, who always support us in the education financing. And also the universities are member of us, some of the universities like the Green Hope University and the Baha University. Next slide. We have had experiences and challenges. Current experience we have in the local education group, the current local education group are very active. They take immediate decisions, they change decisions, and they have very quick impacts. These are called active education sector coordination. This group is the most powerful education group in Somalia, throughout Somalia. For one example, January 2021, January last year, when we had a meeting with the education sector, education coordination, sector coordination, this meeting, the sector, they were celebrating for the print out of the curriculum. But our coalition, we raised our hand and said, today, the celebration of the printing of the new curriculum is not complete. They asked us why. Our coalition told them that children with disabilities, like the blind children, cannot see this beautiful or this pretty curriculum, which was printed in colorful. They cannot see what did you plan for these blind children. Then the ministry came shy, and then they took, within 5 minutes, they took decision which has a value of $500,000 US. They said, from today, we will print this curriculum, this new curriculum, in the form of the DOTIS and the burial system. Then 2 months after, they call us another celebration of the curriculum printing with the children with disability, blind children. So our voice supported these children, blind children. If we keep silent, then this book is of the burial, printed in burial system, DOTIS, have not been printed. So this is for a very current experience we have had. Also, our coalition was given a big role of the education sector committee. We are full member committee of who are reviewing high-level steering of enabling factor of prior to before the proposal of the Somali education proposal is submitted to GCE. A group of 7 people, including me as a representative of the coalition, come together always as high level meeting, and we review all proposals that is submitted to international community like EU or GCE or World Bank. Then we comment, we control, we see interest of our children's education. So in that case, our coalition is very active in this members. That's our current experience. Also, the national education cluster was subdivided into several technical working groups, including advocacy group, child protection group, gender education group. So all these groups, our coalition is active member, and each and every coalition member is representing the coalition in that meetings. Also, the best experience is that we developed what's called the 4W matrix. This 4W matrix is important. It's indicating which NGO is doing what activity, where the activity will take place. So we want to avoid overlapping or duplication of activities. And the challenges we had in we face it as a local education group include last 5 years we have been developing national education policies like gender education policy, teacher development policy, like the school construction infrastructure policy. All policies are in place now. All of them have been validated, have been approved by the local education group. It's on the desktop. But we had low implementation. Almost 90% of this policy is not being implemented. So we need to pressure the local education groups and the ministry to implement it. And last challenge we have is the education is not the first priority in our country, Somalia, due to that the country is having security challenges. You remember last week there were attacks. So our government is prioritizing for the security, military, police, so they are not given enough budget for education sector. Although our coalition have said with the new member of parliament, the new government, now we created new colleagues. We also, with the support from GCE, we are now developing a new research of the education financing of the last 7 years. With the support with the Arab campaign, we are influencing the decision makers of the education sector, education financing, like the member of parliament and the government institutions, including Minister of Finance. We are pressuring all these government personalities to increase education budget and give the education as a priority. So this has the biggest challenge we have in Somalia. Thank you. Next slide.
Oh, Adam, is this the last slide?
Yeah, last slide.
Okay.
There are other community-based organizations or other movements that the coalition is a member, and always we consult with them. We always give priority to marginalized groups. We give them influence in education. We consult with the disability groups. We consult with the women groups. We want to make a voice for the children with disabilities and children girls education. So we also have local groups like the teacher union and like the student union, school unions, TECs, all these human rights organizations. We support them to join us in our movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adam, for really giving a practical example of all the shared lessons that the learning handbook, and it's good to see the work that you guys do, particularly with the introducing the EFO. Just for any coalitions who don't know, GCE has the Education Financing Observatory, which is still at the pilot stage, but the plan is to roll it out throughout our members in order to bring sort of an independent analysis of the direction that financing education is going, looking at issues of gender, human rights, basically overall. And this is basically the independent assessment that we propose when we say that as coalitions, we need to have our own qualitative measures that we guard these enabling factors, or how implementable they are. And very interesting to see that you raising the issue that there hasn't been effective implementation of policies. So thank you for those insights. The next speaker we have is from Sudan, Mr. Naji. Mr. Naji, please keep it brief. You have 10 minutes.
شكرا جزيلا. عبير ممكن تعرض البرزنتيشن؟
يلا.
أنا الكاميرا ما راضية تفتح معي، ممكن تفتحها من عندكم؟
The cameras are not blocked. Anyone can open the camera.
طيب أنا هتحدث عن مجموعة التعليم المحلية اللي هي الليج جروب. الصوت واضح؟
واضح واضح، كمل إليك.
ألو؟
واضح الصوت، كمل.
Hi, yes, you can go ahead, Mr. Naji.
أوكي. تم إنشاء مجموعة التعليم المحلية لتوفير منصة لحوار سياسات التعليم والتنسيق بين الحكومة وشركاء التنمية والمجتمع المدني بما يتماشى مع أهداف التنمية المستدامة والأهداف التنموية للحكومة السودانية بشكل عام والخطة الاستراتيجية لقطاع التعليم، على وجود التحديد تلتزم مجموعة التعليم المحلية بالإجراءات التنموية وفعالية العون الإنساني المبني على أولويات الحكومة السودانية ورؤيتها، وتضمن التنسيق بين البرامج وتنفيذها والموائمة مع المبادئ العامة لفعاليات المعنوية والمعونة. كذلك تم الاتفاق على مبادئ اللي هي تعزيز أجندة عدم ترك أي أحد خلف الرق، واستمرار الوصول إلى تعليم جيد وآمن وشامل للجميع ولأطفال السودان، وهذا لتحقيق ال SDG 4 الهدف الرابع. للمساهمة في التنفيذ الناجح للاستراتيجية التعليم وتعزيز رصد السياسات الرئيسية والبرامج الخاصة بإصلاح قطاع التعليم، العمل كمنصة رئيسية لتنسيق عمل الشركاء التنمويين والشؤون الإنسانية والمنظمات الغير حكومية في جميع القضايا المتعلقة بالتعليم بهدف تسهيل الحوار حول السياسات وتقليل تكلفة التدخلات، لتكون بمثابة آلية لحوار السياسات بين الشركاء التنمويين وحكومة السودان لزيادة التنسيق والتكامل، وبالتالي تعظيم تأثير جهود شركاء التنمية في دعم إصلاح قطاع التعليم، الحفاظ على العلاقات وتطويرها مع وزارة التربية والتعليم والوزارات الأخرى ذات الصلة، وتقديم خدمات التعليم لدعم تحقيق إصلاح قطاع التعليم الرئيسي. عضوية الليج اللي هي حكومة السودان متمثلة في وزارة التربية والتعليم ووزارة المالية، شركاء التنمية والشؤون الإنسانية والطوارئ من وكالات الأمم المتحدة والبنك الدولي وممثلي المجتمع المدني وأصحاب المصلحة، ويمكن المجتمع المدني بيمثل الائتلاف السوداني للتعليم للجميع. جميع أصحاب المصلحة المشاركين في التعليم في السودان هم أعضاء مرحب بهم. الهيكل سيتم تنسيق أو تم تنسيق مجموعة التعليم المحلية من خلال سلسلة من الأجسام لتسهيل الحوار الفعال وتركيز المناقشات على القضايا الحاسمة، بما في ذلك التخطيط والبرمجة الإنسانية والفنية وضمان الجهود المشتركة. سيترأس كل جسم من أجسام المجموعة ممثل عن وزارة التربية والتعليم، ويشترك في رئاستها أحد من شركاء التنمية المانحين أو المجتمع المدني. مجموعات العمل الفنية، تم تشكيل مجموعة عمل فنية لمعالجة القضايا التفصيلية وقضايا القطاع الفرعي، مما يجعل هيكلة مجموعة التعليم أكثر مرونة وقدرة على تكييف مع الاحتياجات والظروف والمتغيرات مثل جائحة كورونا والطوارئ. والآن أنتم تشهدون ما يحدث في السودان من فيضانات وأمطار وسيول أثرت في العملية التعليمية. لذلك يمكن استخدام مجموعة العمل الفنية على أساس زمني محدود أو مهام محدودة أو على أساس دائم. يمكن أن تدعم مجموعة العمل الفرعية تنفيذ الإصلاح الرئيسي أو الإصلاحات الرئيسية والتركيز على تنمية القدرات ومعالجة القضايا الشاملة التي يمكن أيضا إلى المجموعة الأساسية لمجموعة شركاء التعليم لمزيد من المناقشة والاتفاق على أي إجراء مطلوب. ستكون عضوية في المجموعة الفنية مفتوحة للحكومة والتنمويين من منظمات المجتمع المدني تعمل أو تخطط للعمل ضمن المجال الفني في السودان. مجموعة العمل الفنية مسؤولة عن صياغة الاختصاصات المحدودة أو المحددة، ومن المتوقع أيضا تجميع مجموعات العمل الفنية مرة واحدة على الأقل كل 3 شهور. هذا ما تم الاتفاق عليه، إنه الليج أو اللوكال جروب إديوكيشن المفروض كل 3 شهور تجتمع، لكن في الواقع الآن ما بنجتمع كل 3 شهور نسبة للظروف السياسية والوضع اللي بمر به السودان، ويمكن الجميع يعلم ذلك. أيضا هنالك مجموعات فرعية كثيرة تتكلم عن التعليم الرقمي والإلكتروني، تنسيق التعليم الطوارئ، تدريب المعلمين. وفي هذا المجال نحن بدأنا نغير في استراتيجيتنا كائتلاف سوداني للتعليم للجميع من عمل الادفوكسي بس الى الانتقال الى صناعه التعليم. وصناعه التعليم تم الاختيار في الاديوكيشن اوتلاوت الممول من الجي بي عبر منظمه اوكسفام ابس في صناعه
Mr. Naji.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Hamza.
Hello, Mr. Naji.
عفوا ايوه، الانترنت عندنا شويه تعبان يعني. هواصلنا ايضا زي ما ذكرت انه عندنا نحن في مشروعنا مع الاديوكيشن اوت لاود تعليم بصوت عالي، شرعنا الى صناعه التعليم. وفي صناعه التعليم نحن حنعمل في 5 ولايات، تدريب 40 قائد من وزاره التربيه والتعليم على مستوى الولايه في 5 ولايات: شمال دارفور وجنوب كردفان والقضارف والولايه الشماليه وولايه الخرطوم. حندرب 40 قائد تعليمي في التخطيط الاستراتيجي وقياده التعليم، وكذلك حندرب 40 مدير مدرسه لتحسين البيئه المدرسيه واداره المدرسه وقياده المدرسه. ايضا هنالك مجموعه معنيه بتعليم الفتيات، مجموعه معنيه بالتعليم الرحل اللي هم البدو، مجموعه معنيه بالتخطيط، مجموعه معنيه بالصحه المدرسيه والمياه والصرف الصحي والتغذيه، مجموعه معنيه بالتعليم الفني والمهني والتقني، مجموعه معنيه بتعليم الطفوله المبكره، مجموعه معنيه بالتعليم الاشخاص ذوي الاعاقه. مجموعه شركاء التعليم الاساسيه لتسهيل الحوار وتدفق المعلومات. تتألف مجموعة شركاء التعليم الأساسية من مجموعة محدودة من الأعضاء من العضوية برئاسة وزارة التربية والتعليم، ورئاسة من مناوبة من المجتمع المدني، وعضوية كل شركاء العملية التعليمية. وأيضا سيتم ترشيح واحد من كل منظمة وطنية غير حكومية، واحد من المنظمات الدولية وشركاء من وكالات الأمم المتحدة اليونيسيف واليونسكو، بالإضافة للاتحاد الأوروبي والبنك الدولي. وسيتم ترشيح 2 من المانحين في هذه المجموعة. تجتمع أو المراجعة المشتركة لقطاع التعليم، يجتمع كل عضوية مجموعة شركاء التعليم مرة واحدة في السنة على الأقل، بهدف مراجعة أو المراجعة المشتركة لقطاع التعليم وتقويم وتقييم العملية التعليمية. أيضا تحديد اختصاصات وهيكلة المراجعة السنوية المشتركة في شروط مرجعية مفصلة بهدف أساسي، وهو المشاركة في الحوار والتحليل التقدم ومراقبة الإنفاق في تنفيذ الخطة الاستراتيجية. ويمكن الأسبوع الماضي يوم السبت والأحد الماضي كان هنالك الاجتماع التنسيقي بين لوزراء التربية والتعليم في الولايات ال 18 ومدراء عامين التخطيط ومدراء الإعلام ومدراء الامتحانات. يمكن المنظمة الوحيدة على مستوى السودان كمنظمة دولية ولا وطنية كان هو الائتلاف السوداني للتعليم للجميع، هو المنظمة الوحيدة المشاركة في هذا اللقاء المهم لقطاع التعليم. أيضا تستمر عملية المشاركة في التنسيق بين شركاء التعليم على مستوى الولايات. بيكون في اجتماع دوري لوزراء التربية والتعليم وبشراكة معنا نحن كما ذكرت هسه الآن. وسيعمل فريق العمل المعني بالتعليم على مستوى الولايات على سد الفجوة والتخطيط الإنساني، بيكون برئاسة مدير عام الوزارة على مستوى الولاية وعضوية المنظمات. الأدوار والمسؤوليات بيتحكم إنه التعليم، نحن بنقول التعليم مسؤولية الدولة، لأنه الحكومة لوحدها لا تستطيع فعل شيء في التعليم. لما نقول الدولة معنية الدولة اللي هي الحكومة والقطاع الخاص والمجتمع المدني، مثلث متساوي الأضلاع. بصورة عامة نحن في الائتلاف السوداني الآن في الوضع السياسي الراهن واللج والمجموعة الدولية، نحن طالبنا مرارا وتكرارا عدم ربط الدعم للعملية التعليمية بالوضع السياسي في الدولة المعنية. نحن الآن في السودان تم ربط الوضع السياسي والحكم العسكري الموجود في السودان، وأي حكومة تمر على السودان منذ العهد البائد، منذ عهد حكومة البشير، طالبنا بأنه الرؤساء في الدول الأفريقية وفي الدول النامية لما يتولوا السلطة بيتمسكوا بالسلطة، وبتكون هنالك قرارات دولية على الحكام يجب أن لا تربط بالدعم عبر السياسات. دعم الدول ومصلحة الطفل هي المصلحة العليا وهي المصلحة الفضلى بالنسبة لنا نحن كمنظمات مجتمع مدني، بغض النظر عن من هو على رأس السلطة ومن هو الحاكم. الحاكم لن يتأثر بإيقاف التمويل أو وقف الدعم من الدولة المعنية، بل حيتأثر المجتمع ويتأثر الطفل، كما حدث لنا في السودان. الآن الأمم المتحدة وحتى GCE عبر البنك الدولي وسياسات البنك الدولي الآن أو وقف التمويل، وقفت المنحة الخاصة بالGCE. المتضرر الأول والأخير هو الطفل السوداني. أنا أتمنى، وهذا نداء من هذا المنبر العالمي من GCE من كل منظمات المجتمع المدني، إنه يجب أن نناصر ونقيف في مناصرة دعم التعليم في السودان وعدم ربطه بالأوضاع السياسية التي تمر على السودان والحكم الديكتاتوري اللي بيمر على السودان. شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you, Naji. Thank you for that presentation. I'd like to open the floor for comments, inputs, highlights, anything that anyone wants to share, or even questions.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
I would like to echo what Mr. Nigel has been saying, is that the education situation in these countries need a continuous support and continuous influencing on the decision making and those who are planning our education. So there should be many drivers for change, and the leg should focus on the best way to capitalize on the impact of the support provided by the body. We believe that there is a big issue in relation to the student.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you clearly. You're not clear. Where you are, there's a lot of disturbance. background noise.
أنا ما سمعت السؤال. السؤال ما واضح، الصوت ما واضح.
There are many issues related to the school environment and
Yeah, we can't hear you.
We are a little bit far from achieving the SDG core, and there are many indicators.
Okay, Sama, I don't think he can hear us. Can you please mute him so long?
I'm gonna mute him. Can you ask him to put his question in the chat box, please?
Oh, so the question was, do you guys have any inputs or any things that you'd like to highlight in terms of activities happening in the legs? And mainly, what kind of support would you require from GCE in order to ensure that the work and the activities you do around the legs are much more effective? That's the question.
عفوا، ممكن السؤال مرة ثانية؟
The question is, what kind of support from GCE would you need in supporting the work that you are conducting in the legs at the country level? That is the question.
نحن نحتاج إلى الدعم الفني واللوجستي والدعم المادي والمناصرة للضغط على المجتمع الدولي في إنه ما يربط دعم السودان ودعم الطفل السوداني في التعليم بالسياسة الموجودة في الدولة، لأنه نحن الآن في وضع سياسي سيء جدا جدا وسيستمر هذا الوضع إلى عدد من السنوات. الآن نحن بنعاني من عدم استقرار سياسي. يمكن الوزارة الآن منذ أشهر قليلة تعين وزير للتربية والتعليم. الآن الوزارات الولائية يسير مدراء عامين التعليم، لا يوجد وزراء في الولايات. الوضع السياسي يجب الدعم الدولي للتعليم وللطفل السوداني لا يربط بالسياسة أو للحكومة الموجودة في الدولة. هنالك وكالات أمم متحدة، اليونيسيف، اليونسكو، أي وكالة من وكالات الأمم المتحدة دي ممكن تدعم أو الدعم يجي عبرها ويتم تنفيذه في السودان ويستفيد منه الطفل السوداني عبر منظمات المجتمع المدني الدولية والوطنية. ده ان احنا طالبينه، والمناصره والمسانده من GCE من الحمله العالميه انها تدعم هذا الاتجاه بانه ما يجيف التمويل من السودان، لانه الوضع السوداني وضع سيء الان في الطوارئ. مرت جائحه كورونا وقبلها الثوره، والان نحن نعاني من دمار شامل نسبه للظروف الطبيعيه والتغير المناخي اللي بمر به السودان، والكل يشهد في وسائط التواصل الاجتماعي والأجهزة الإعلامية من الدمار لغرى بأكملها ومدارس ومراكز تدريب اتمسحت من على وجه الأرض نسبة للسيول والفيضانات والأمطار.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Naji. I've noted that. Yes, Walid.
شكرا على اليوم الجميل وشكرا على العروض الهائله. الحقيقه كنا مستفيدين جدا ومستمتعين بيها. الحقيقه انا عندي يعني مداخله سريعه. يمكن الاستاذ رفعت في عرضه طرح تحدي خاص بالمعلومات والوزنات وبالارقام. يمكن احنا محتاجين في المنطقه العربيه دعم من الجي سي اي في انه ازاي يبقى عندنا معلومات صحيحه وواضحه من كل الحكومات العربيه فيما يخص موضوع التعليم، لانه الحقيقه احنا بنشتغل بشكل عشوائي بدون معلومات صحيحه وبدون معلومات واضحه، مش قادرين نحط ايدينا على التدخلات اللي في محلها. فاحنا محتاجين كامبين كبيره تتعمل من الجي سي اي في صالح المنطقه العربيه، وطبعا نقدر نقول ان
الصوت اختفى يا وليد.
فعلا الصوت ضايع.
Hello, Mr. Walid, you just cut a bit there. Can't hear you. Okay, then, can you please add all the other inputs once you, okay, technically on the chat box. I'm now moving to the second agenda item being the GCE strategic update, as well as a response from our GCE Global Coordinator, Mr. Grant Njete, who will introduce, Stephanie will take us through the strategy as well as give us a response to the inputs that you've just required for GCE's support. Grant, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pumza, and thanks so much to everyone, for joining the call. It was really interesting to hear, the live or the real, examples of how you as GCE members are engaging in the lake. I think, there is we can't overemphasize this any further, that, there is really, an urgent need for us as a movement to really strengthen our national level engagement. There's no better time for that, but now we really need to ensure that, we are there and, we are able to advocate for the right to education. I was very much interested to hear the success story, if we are to call it that way, made by Adam, whereby when the government printed the curriculum, it was only, focusing for the abled children. But then their intervention, their advocacy, their engagement in the league has really helped them, to put into context also that, we do have children with disabilities, and those also have to be included. So this is something that, we'll reach out to you, Adam, because I think it is important that, we highlight such success stories, be it on the GCE website or be it on the GCE newsletter, because these are things that, we really want to hear more, we really want to see happening, we really want to ensure that, our members are engaged. And also what was interesting in both Naji and Adam is the full engagement of the national coalition. We do know that, in certain coalitions, it is only one person who attends the league and doesn't share anything, with all the other coalition members. But it is very interesting to see that, if your engagement goes further, that, you are also able to share that very same information with, your coalition members to ensure that, there is the league processes are institutionalized within your national coalition. So that is very, very interesting. There is a TACE meeting, the Transforming Education Summit meeting, that's going to be happening in September. Or everything that's going to happen in New York will end up at the national level. And it will go to the very same question that Walid was asking in the issue of data. how can we engage more if we don't know, what is out there? And as Pumza indicated, also by Adam indicated, GCE has got a new program or project that we are engaging. It's called Education Financing Observatory. This is a data-driven, program that will ensure that data is available. That whenever we are making claims, whatever we're doing, it is informed by the processes that we have really investigated ourselves as civil society. Now, coming back to the issue of the movement, as we all know that very soon we will be going to the World Assembly, and you might have received letters of eligibility for those that are in good standing with GCE. We will really plead with you to really inform us who you are nominating to be part of that World Assembly. We need that information as quickly as possible, because we need to organize the hotels, the flights, and all the other things. But also, if you require visas, we will be able to assist you in time. So please do respond to that email, so that we can ensure that you are present at the World Assembly. The World Assembly is the most important meeting for GCE every 4 to 5 years. So it is very important that we have as many members as we can. One of the agenda items that we always discuss during any World Assembly is around what GCE key priorities will be. GCE as a movement. And this document is what we call the GCE strategic plan. If you can remember very well, some many months, in 2021, we started a process of evaluating or reflecting on what GCE has done, using the current strategy that we have. What have been able to achieve, and what are the issues that we need to address. And all of these processes were to inform the new strategy that GCE was going to have. We had webinars, we had surveys, we had so many processes that we put in place to ensure that you as our members are able to inform the strategic plan. As we said in Nepal in 2018, for those of you that were there, we indicated that one thing that we want to do is to give you back the movement, so that you as members are able to determine the GCE work. So hence that the whole GCE strategic plan process has been driven by the members. We know that we have been really over-labeling you with lots of emails, lots of processes, and apologies if that was really overburdening. But the process or the idea of all of that was to ensure that you as the GCE members are the ones that are making call on what GCE should be working on. We have come to a stage that we seem to have a very good picture of what you want GCE to engage on. So we contracted a consultant by the name of Stefan Conrad, who has been supporting us in putting all those ideas, all those thoughts together. It has been really a lot of work to listen to so many, to all constituents of GCE, looking at the survey results, to come up with a document that we seem to say, this is what GCE members want us to do. But there will be further opportunities for you through this meeting to make inputs into what is it that it's not very clear, what should we emphasize, what should we highlight, and also there will be further surveys that will help us to do that. So I'll hand over to Stephanie to just take us through what you as our members want us to do in the next 4 years. Over to you, Stephanie.
Great, thanks. Oops, hold on. Now, normally this should share, but it doesn't. Hold on, I hope it does share now. Yes, it looks like. Great. Yes, so Grant spoke already about the fact that the strategy formulation has been really a very, very participatory exercise, because logically the GCE is a movement, and thus the strategy will really live by the commitment and the interest that the GCE members have in implementing the strategy. And as part of the process, we conducted a global survey. We conducted also key informant interviews, and we met separately with the Youth Action Group to make sure that we really spoke to all stakeholders and understood as much as possible what their priorities were and how these priorities were regionally different or per constituency different. And what was really interesting in this process was that there were very clear and strong conjoint messages about what the strategy should really be all about and how it should look like. The first message from the many respondents that we got, we had really very strong representation in the feedback process. So we feel very confident that the proposal really is based on the interests of all constituencies and regions. So the key message was that the strategy should be realistic, it should be jointly achievable, and it should be measurable. And it should be short and simple. So a clear plea for not making it a long and winding document, but rather that is quick to access and understand, and that can then help members to really orient their own strategic views or align their own strategic plans. A message was also to integrate existing sub-strategies such as for youth and gender to avoid duplication of efforts and make things simply simpler. Then there was equally a very clear focus, a joint focus on what the key themes would be for policy and advocacy and campaign work in the future. And these really were oriented around the big question, how does education have to be transformed to meet the new needs of this world and learners worldwide? The second big topic that was very dear at the heart of everyone in all regions was the question of education in emergencies. And finally, and not surprisingly, education financing scored third among the clear priorities of all constituencies and members. Another clear message was that there is really a clear priority in regard to the action areas that need to be prioritized within the upcoming strategy. And members found that the capacity development of members, as well as resource mobilization to ensure global services of the GCE and global joint advocacy and campaigning would be a priority. And then last but not least, the question, how can we make our campaigns, our joint campaigning and advocacy much more hard-hitting? How can we step up to make sure that our campaign action becomes as impactful as possible? And then finally, a common message was really so how, and that continued what already was decided in Nepal. How can we indeed continue to put members in the driver's seat for advocacy and make sure that advocacy at country and regional level is in as much as possible supported, because that's where the action is happening, while having, of course, at the global level, meaningful engagement that would then help to support and create synergies with the regional and country level advocacy. We then have also identified together with the members the biggest concerns about the education environment worldwide. And I speak to this very quickly because we have very limited time until this meeting ends, actually 1 minute, but I hope we can run over a little bit. So the key main concerns were unsurprisingly, about the global setbacks and progress related to COVID-19, economic downturn, disasters, conflict, and emergency. And the big question, will we reach the SDG 4 ambitions? The second priority or key concern was about shrinking and changing civic space and engagement in many environments, with crackdowns on civil society, but also the issue of young people and other actors having their own advocacy agendas and very often not having sufficient synergies and intergenerational actions that would then create greater impact. Then education at the crossroads, really the question, how can education become more relevant to provide learners with what they need to live and succeed in an increasingly complex world. The question of digital education or digital opportunities in education. And of course, the big question, how can education contribute to greater sustainability, greater social justice? So the content of education very much there on radar of the GCE members. Privatization and public disengagement from funding, a key issue related or key issues related to the question of education financing. And then last but not least, the big question of discrimination and rollback of rights that puts certain educational content such as sexuality education, for example, under fire, but also creates real barriers to many groups in different groups in different environments. So in a nutshell, these are the key concerns that members felt need to be pursued by the advocacy and campaign priorities. And these priorities indeed are transforming education, education in emergencies and crises, and education financing. And I spoke to this, or Brent spoke to this a little bit as well. There was another very important common theme that when we spoke in the key informal interviews came about as a clear common goal. And that was the whole question of how can we really reignite and grow the influence of the global movement for education, make our campaigning more impactful, but also claim or reclaim or more strongly claim our space as the voice for civil society in education, given the fact that there are so many other actors now engaged, and particularly intergovernmental organizations that have started their own civil society engagement processes since a number of years, where there's a risk of duplication, and the GCE might not always be perceived as the immediate go-to actor for civil society engagement. So to achieve this common goal and working on those three joint priorities, members identified four key joint objectives. Spoke about it: step up influence through advocacy and campaigning, the first and most important one. Secondly, a key topic for everyone was either the diversification, the growth, or the consolidation of memberships, and of the wider network and alliances and partnerships of the GCE, linked very closely also with a perceived need to grow not only in network, but also in reputation. The third joint objective relates to growing the GCE's collective ability to influence, really stepping up learning and peer learning in regard to the art and science of advocating and campaigning to support members to be as effective as possible with their influencing work. And the fourth priority relates to strengthening the sustainability of the GCE and the accountability of the GCE. And that has basically two sub-strands that one have to do with mobilizing the right resources to support global action, but also the essential services that the GCE Secretariat provides. And then secondly, continue to strengthen the board accountability, to strengthen strategy monitoring, and to make sure that the board enables in the best way possible the Secretariat that provides strategic oversight, but also is effective in communicating board decisions to its members and the regional constituencies which are represented on the board. We then identified also two internal drivers, and these were really about creating greater member leadership in advocacy and campaigning, and strengthening, and that is really for the members, and stepping back maybe a little bit of the Secretariat, where the Secretariat was not always as effective in coordinate representation, and making sure that that the agenda shifted more to the local level. And then secondly, for the Secretariat, strengthen coordination and member services to make sure that all members feel they really benefit to the maximum of the GCE services. Then this exercise also helped to reformulate a little bit the description of what the GCE is, to put slight nuances in place. So the new description or identity that we formulated was that the global education of education represents worldwide the voice of civil society in education policy spaces and processes. Our members advocate and campaign together for a free, inclusive, quality education that is without any discrimination and bias, promotes lifelong learning, and adequately values and invests in teachers. And this slight rewording was felt to be needed to reflect a little bit better the recent commitments to greater gender equality and inclusion that came with the last year's gender equality and inclusion policy, but also to give a bit more emphasis on the role of teachers and on the big ask for lifelong learning that occasionally fell a little bit under the table in the way that the GCE described itself. I realize that we are now almost 10 minutes over. I'm going to rapidly talk to you about the theory of change that describes the critical actions and will then lead to the articulation of clear results that GCE members will commit to as part of the operational planning. So the theory of change basically identifies actions at the level of the board. Here, you see that here. And the board, the main board contributions are, as I said, really effective governance, planning, oversight, and performance monitoring, and strategic monitoring. At the level of the Secretariat, very importantly, the effective coordination with regional networks and regional constituencies, the mobilization of resources for global action and member services, and ensuring effective strategy and results monitoring. And then the coordination of advocacy in the global spaces, building capacity to influence, produce powerful tools, knowledge, and information, facilitate learning and peer support, and building global and coordinate worldwide memberships, partnerships, and alliances. And as I say this obviously will always build on the plans in place by the regional coalitions already. It's not going to be top down, but it's rather going to be a bottom up approach. At the level of the joint movement actions, there we would like to see strategic actions from all members in regard to effectively engaging in annual campaigning, timely solidarity action, and media mobilization around those priority themes. Participation and effective interventions in key spaces at all levels. Participation, quite active participation in knowledge sharing, peer support, and the use of the GCE produced tools and resources, engagement in monitoring, reporting, and learning from results, and as identified strategically by the regional coalitions or the national coalitions, efforts to diversify, consolidate, or grow the membership and partnerships, and building new alliances, particularly with actors outside the education sector, to create greater power with others on education and penetrate other sectors with messages around education. And the intermediate outcomes that we would like to see that are all related and interlinked are reputational growth for the GCE and its members, greater effective mass mobilization, greater media attention and visibility, and thus greater credibility for GCE and its constituencies, and greater reach and collective power and influence. And this in turn then would result in the longer term strategic outcomes, which would be positive changes in policies, budgets, and decisions to transform and finance education and guarantee education in emergencies. So that in a nutshell is the theory of change that you see here summarized at the right-hand side in purple again. I realize that the time for this meeting is over. I'd still like to allow for a few comments, but also refer to the fact that in this week, I believe there will be another consultation on these draft goals and objectives and theory of change that will go out to make sure that everybody has again their say and we can improve on it, so that in November when we head to the General Assembly, all members will feel confident that the strategy already meets their wishes and desires and has been modified to really take into account everyone's interests and inputs. And I see that there is Tayeb who has a comment. Please go ahead and ask your questions or feel free to type in the chat box.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, I think for us as a civil society organization, sometimes we are a bit ambitious, and in some aspect we jump over the reality of our context. For example, in Sudan now, over the past 3 years, there are a lot of political changes, and even those at the highest level of the government, they are unable to initiate any big project or ambitious planning or make any strategic changes, as the situation is a little bit shaky. So, for example, sometimes if you do some interventions that will be very effective. Yesterday, we have concluded a 3 days training on project management for development professional for around 35 people. The majority of them from our organization members. And we had the Registrar General of the organization from the Humanitarian Aid Commission, which is responsible of running the humanitarian work in Sudan.
I have the impression we lost you. Does anyone else hear?
Or the higher level.
Yes.
So working on both ground level and higher level in a very balanced way, I think that will help us to achieve our desirable impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other comments? Please feel free also to write them in the chat box, though I don't read Arabic. I'm sure we can translate it afterwards.
Okay, Madam Stephanie, I am John Dado from Kenya. I work in an inclusive education project. Kenya is one of the countries which has been affected by the current biting drought in the Horn of Africa. To mention, schools have actually been worst affected, and especially the girls and children with special education needs. Just to pose a question as to what GCE can do in relation to response to the current drought in the Horn of Africa, Kenya included. Back to you, Stephanie.
I think this speaks definitely to the priority of education in emergencies, right, under which drought qualifies, and the GCE being a movement would take advocacy action. One of the ambitions under stepping up advocacy and campaigning is, as a matter of fact, that the GCE would conduct more solidarity action. That means when there are topical issues such as the drought in the Horn of Africa, that the GCE would conjointly step up and accelerate or initiate joint advocacy and campaigning around these issues to mobilize the attention of donors, for example, or of other actors to take action.
Thank you, Madam Stephanie.
Are there any other comments?
I don't see any more hands, Stephanie.
Great, and I realize also that the time has run over. As I said before, there will be a survey launched where you will see again this slide deck together with a few questions that will then help us to really see your input and get your input on those draft priorities. So I hope you will all participate. I know there have been a lot of surveys also for the strategy evaluation, but it's really worthwhile that you participate, because we hope to go into the General Assembly in November with a firm commitment already of all members around the strategy document. Thanks a lot for listening to me. Thanks also again for your wonderful participation and feedback already in the run-up process to developing the strategy. I'm deeply grateful for all the insights and all the learnings that I personally had. And I'm looking forward to hearing more comments as they are collected. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And now we'll hand over to Pumza to wrap up. Over to you, Pumza.
Thank you, Stephanie and Grant, for taking us through the strategy. Firstly, we'd like to thank everyone who took the time to engage us and to share their experiences. Thank you to the panelists and the interpreters. And I'm sorry we took a bit time and we're over time, but we've come to the end of our session. And I think just to make a few comments, it's a good thing that when we focus on the context of education in emergency, we highlight the adverse effects of climate change and education, because this is something that is happening across the world, and it will affect education continuity. Anyway, colleagues, thank you for your time, and may you have a wonderful weekend and day. And now declare the meeting officially closed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pomza.